Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Randomly Offensive. Christopher Lee once said, and I quote, "Every actor has to make a terrible film from time to time, but the trick is to never be terrible in them," end quote. 2004's Catwoman is most famous for bringing one of the worst movies in the early 2000s to the big screen. When the film starring Halle Berry is mentioned, it is instantly recognized as the failure that it was, bringing in only $82 million when it cost them $100 million to make it. It won the nomination for Worst Movie and caused Halle Berry to receive the nomination for Worst Actress. However, upon re-watching Catwoman, I realized how important of a movie it is. Catwoman made many mistakes, was written horribly, and underdelivered in the climax, and in the character Patience. Now, I don't care that they made Patience Catwoman instead of Selina Kyle, because if I'm being honest, the character Patience isn't that bad of a character, especially when compared to many other main female heroes. And Halle Berry did a good job. She played the character she was given. Warner Brothers are known for being strict with actors following the script, meaning actors rarely get to bring what they believe the character is to life, but only is allowed to display someone else's vision. Halle Berry's Catwoman, I believe, went through the exact same thing as Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, which is their character failing due to the story holding them back. Now, the reason I believe Catwoman is important is because despite of all their mistakes and lousy writing causing the movie to fail, Warner Brothers have repeated the exact same mistakes in most of their DC projects, and expect star power and sex appeal to carry the film when that was shown time and time again not to work. So, let's do a deep dive on this movie and see why it failed despite the star power of Halle Berry. The movie begins with a blank slate, showing Patience for only a few seconds before abruptly shifting to a scene with no context. This scene covers why people are buying the Beuline product, followed by shoehorning in conflict between George Hedera and Laurel Hedera. At this point, we've already gotten a feel that this movie is going to jump from scene to scene sporadically. It suddenly cuts back to Patience, with Sally informing the audience that she is the most talented artist in the whole company. We are then informed by Patience this is her first lead campaign. Now, this is a big problem because we're already being informed about the character through dialogue instead of getting to witness it and experience it ourselves, getting to know the character. George is confirmed to be a prick, Patience is confirmed to have no backbone, and Laurel is depicted as Patience's ally in the following scene. This entire intro and all of the scenes that are a part of it are very sporadic and are leaving us trying to figure out what the flow of the movie is going to be. We then see her struggle in her daily life as a clumsy and quiet person. She has a cliche scene where she can't sleep due to partying neighbors. The cat Midnight ends up needing help, so Patience tries to save it, showing her careless yet soft-heartedness tendencies. It shows her to be impulsive all in a 30-second window and tries to explain her entire character in that same short window. This scene is also used to introduce the cop and love interest, Tom Lone. We are then thrown into the most cliche coworkers meet love interest scene ever displayed on screen. This scene is incredibly awkward and trying way too hard to make Sally and the fan favorite. It ends up with a coffee date being scheduled and briefly mentions the Catwoman leather suit as a teaser. This movie at this point is all over the place. We cannot get a grasp of the flow of this movie, and it takes the audience out of it far too often. Patience must now get her project to her boss by midnight, but she cannot get it delivered, so she decides to take it herself. The doors are locked, and even though George was expecting it at midnight, he must have went home. Now, this is a huge plot hole. You'd think that if he was expecting it by midnight on his desk, you would assume he would wait there until midnight. But apparently they forgot that entire scene. So she ends up having to sneak in. We then see a meeting about how harmful and addictive the Beuline product is. Laurel is shown calling the shots, with the absence of George, already spoiling their own plot twist. Patience sees it and gets noticed and chased, and then shot at, which is really extreme. She is one person with no proof. They literally have no reason to be worried about this, right? Similar companies have gotten away with much, much worse. If she would have tried to take this to the authorities, they would have won any court case extremely quickly, especially since no one else has come out about Beuline being a dangerous product. So, to save her life, she then jumps into the pipes of the waste stream, and they are ordered to seal the doors, not knowing when the next stream will be, and not knowing if she might or might not have a cell phone, because it is 2004. So, only one phone call before her death is all she needs to link them to her murder, and now they're being investigated for everything. So this whole scene just makes no sense in the logical world. So, of course, her character is then killed, and the most unexplained scene of all these cats bringing her back is then played. Now, this scene is incredibly out of place. It's very well choreographed. I think it's the best choreographed scene in the whole damn movie, but it is so out of place, and there's no explanation behind it. The audience is confused at this point. We then get a scene where she gets to experience her heightened senses, and she gets to jump and climb like a cat now. And then the scene of her waking up late for coffee with Tom is just thrown in our face, and they expect us to care. And then she's introduced, well, we're introduced to Ophelia Powers. Now, this is followed by an incredibly meaningless scene, and I'll get into that a little bit more in the future here. And then it jumps back to her being at work. Now, this actually is a good work scene. Her cat personality comes out, she chews out her boss, she ends up getting fired, and then she sees a necklace and hints at her thieving desire, because apparently now just wanting to steal things is natural. And Sally passes out abruptly, reminding us that the Beuline product is bad, because by this point we have actually forgotten the driving force of the movie, so we are having to be reminded abruptly that the Beuline product is what Catwoman is going to have to stop eventually, right? We then jump back to the scene of Tom, with her giving him the coffee cup with the word sorry on it, and this is followed by an incredibly awkward and sexualized one-on-one basketball scene, and this is incredibly inappropriate because they got kids all around them, so that just makes this scene even more awkward for anyone watching it, and they use it to display her new powers. And the movie just moves at this pace for a while, just meaningless and cringy scenes. There's a scene where she can't sleep due to partying neighbors. She kicks down the door and destroys the speakers and crashes the party. She then cuts her hair for seemingly no reason and changes her character with no explanation. I think they're going for a split personality thing here, but unfortunately they never explain anything, so we actually don't know. Then there's a jewelry fight scene. This is our first introduction to Catwoman, and now the movie starts introducing the cringy cat-based dialogue that we get throughout the rest of the damn film. Catwoman ends up stealing the jewelry after stopping the robbers. She leaves some of it in a bag with cupcakes for the cops. This whole thing just makes no sense, and they don't explain anything from this scene. This scene was incredibly useless. And then we get to see her using her laptop and visiting Ophelia, where we are told why and how she became the Catwoman, and how she received the powers. This actually has potential. This scene could have been a very important scene in the movie. Now, the pacing of the movie is what ruined this scene, and the way the scene was played also ruined it. So, we'll have to get into that a little bit here in the future as well. We suddenly get a fully transformed Catwoman with very little build-up due to half the movie being wasted. We then jump from scene to scene with seemingly no direction. Catwoman is framed for murder so that there is conflict between her and Tom. Now, the fight scene between these two could have been choreographed better, but it isn't horrible. The "Does Your Girlfriend Know About Us" was out of place and would have made more sense if these two fought 2 or 3 times by this point, right? Laurel then displays a marble skin by using Beuline, so now she has like a superpower because of this beauty product, which, yeah, sure, why not? The sushi scene was funny. I kind of liked the sushi scene. The fair scene was kind of odd. And these scenes, I know it seems like I'm talking about them out of order, but these scenes really do just jump from scene to scene to scene to scene with little context at this point. And it really does seem like there's no direction because this movie has no direction. They don't know what they want to do. They have so many ideas, and they're shoving it all in this movie. And that is a problem. That can hurt a movie. You have to throw away things you don't want. So anyway, Patience ends up getting arrested after being framed for George's death. And she's arrested by Tom, but is able to slip between the bars due to lazy writing. Tom decides to talk to Laurel and is almost shot, but then saved by Catwoman. We watch the final fight, Laurel dies, and now Catwoman is just roaming free, and they roll the credits. So Catwoman did have a story arc, but it was horribly told, right? And Halle Berry could have given us a great Catwoman. She could have done this character justice because she is a great actress and we're all aware of it. Her talent and her skill is recognized. And the Patience character was not a perfect character. She was not overpowered. She had many flaws, which made her a perfect candidate to be a good main protagonist. So how I want to finish this video is by doing a rewrite of at least half the movie and fix all the mistakes that they should have already fixed before this movie hit the big screen. I want to give Catwoman the character arc and the character development that she deserves and that Halle Berry deserves. So without further ado, let's hop into it and see if we can save this movie once and for all. The film starts off with Patience at work, struggling yet knowledgeable in her field, like many people in the workforce. No jumping from scene to scene. Let us get to know Patience and her friend Sally. Allow us to have a fluid, motion-moving movie. Let us have fluent speed, right? So now we can show her at her home life. We can introduce George and Laurel through the eyes of Patience as her bosses. We can have Patience watch Laurel struggling with getting replaced. We can have Patience talk to Sally about the replacement and how well Laurel is taking it. We can also see the rift between George and Laurel through the eyes of our character now. So they're under the impression that Laurel's taken this incredibly well, and then Patience has to go into the office to turn in her project, and that is when she sees Laurel crying and drinking, and so Patience decides to console her. Now we got to get to know Patience as a more tender-hearted character, and we're getting to evolve Laurel's character through the eyes of our character, evolving all these characters in a fluid motion. And what this does is it actually drives us to care about the antagonist, because now that our protagonist that we've already gotten to know cares, it signals to us that we too should care. George then walks in on this scene and asks for the finished project. He calls it trash and tells her she has until midnight tomorrow to have a new one on his desk. On her way home, Midnight is then seen walking across the road. Now, what you can do is you can have Midnight throughout the scenes of us getting to know Patience so that we are aware that it's there, right? But then when we really see him, he's walking across the road and he's about to get hit by a car. So she dives in to save the cat. She grabs the cat. The car comes to a screeching stop and bumps Patience. A man gets out of the car to make sure she's okay and is introduced as Tom. and that is how the love interest is introduced and revealed. Now that we've had plenty of time to get to know Patience's character, now we can get to know the love interest, and now we can watch in a fluid paced motion. We can watch their relationship grow. We can watch their relationship interact. We can get to know the relationship between Patience and Tom. Now, once this has gone on long enough, we have to introduce the hero part of the story, right? And how we do that is, instead of having the delivery of the project go wrong, we can have her working hard on this project, and when she finishes it, she looks at the clock and she sees that it's 1:30 now. And so she's an hour and a half late, but she doesn't want to get fired. So she decides to take it to the office herself, and she's going to sneak in there and sneak it on his desk. Now, this shows her more antagonistic side, her more dishonest side, because Catwoman is not a superhero or a supervillain. She is in the middle. And so now we can get a hint of that personality. And then, when she walks into the office, that's when she sees the harm that this Beuline product can do. And her moral obligation kicks in because her friend uses it. People she cares about uses it. She sells this to people, and so she ends up having a moral obligation. And now the conflict starts brewing because she's in the office. Everyone sees her, including Laurel. And Laurel can now start pleading with her, and Patience wants to leak it. She has her phone ready. She's going to call the authorities. She's going, while the proof is already on the screen, while she's there. And so conflict grows, and Laurel ends up getting physical with Patience. And then Patience is accidentally knocked over, and she hits her head on the desk, and she ends up getting killed. But now it's an accident, and Laurel needs to hide everything. She needs to hide the death, but she also needs to hide the danger that is lurking within the Beuline product. So she ends up ordering her men to dump the body into a trash can. And now we have a death scene that is more fluid and makes more sense to the plot, and it builds the characters up even further. Now we can be introduced to Ophelia Powers. She can be walking through the alley with a huge group of cats, and with the cat's help, she lifts the body out of the trash can, and then we can have our scene cut. We can finally have a scene bounce, because now we're at the time of the movie where a scene bounce is not going to ruin the flow. When Patience wakes up, she wakes up in the bed of Ophelia's house, right? And she wakes up and she remembers dying. None of this amnesia stuff, okay? She wakes up, she remembers dying, she asks what happens, and that's when Ophelia can explain what Midnight has given her and how she's back to life and why Midnight has chosen her. And then she can explain all the cat women throughout the ages and explain the mythology behind everything that's going on. And then we can have somewhat of a training montage. This will allow us to get to know Catwoman even more. It'll build Catwoman up as a character. And now she is becoming Catwoman, and she is now going to be on this revenge path, this revenge story, but her Patience is supposed to be dead. So that's when she ends up having to cut her hair. She cuts her hair so that no one knows that Patience is still alive. She cuts her hair, she does this whole new look, and then she is given the Catwoman suit. Or she just goes and buys a leather suit and tears it up. I'm not, the suit is not important. But now we have our origin story in a fluid pace. And now what we can do is we can actually start moving this movie forward in fluid scenes in that manner. Having Catwoman going on this revenge quest. Now when she fights Tom, it's going to mean more because she's going to be flirtatious, but Tom is now coping with the death of a woman that he got to know. And so this will build more character arc. It'll build more emotion behind all the conflicts. And now throughout the movie, we can actually explore just Catwoman in fluid Catwoman fighting scenes. And as she's going through, she can, like, you know, they now the movie is set up so that she can start bringing down the ranks of Beulah. Instead of just hopping scene to scene to scene, she has a clear goal. She knows Laurel was the one that killed her, and so she's climbing through, and we can have Laurel grow as a antagonist, and we can have Catwoman grow as a protagonist, and she can slowly start tearing apart the business and get to the point where she can actually take down Laurel. And I do believe that if they were to have set it up in this form, if they would have given it a more fluid flow, this character would have been great. And if they would have just given Halle Berry a little bit more freedom to play the character, I think this movie could have been saved. And so there's a lesson to be learned from this movie, because so many movies are still making the mistakes that this movie made for the first time. And so if you just look at why a movie failed, you can prevent it, which is what Warner Brothers needs to do, because this movie had potential, but they never cared to cash in on that potential. They just continued making the same mistakes over and over again. So yeah, that is all I have for today. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much. Please comment your thoughts on how you think this movie could have worked, or if you think it already worked. Do let me know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe and share. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Bye.